Hello, hello, and welcome to today's acrylic painting tutorial. My name is Jessie Robertson, and this is Keep It Colorful. Now, in today's class, we'll be painting a classic red barn dressed up for the holidays. There's snowy evergreens, a wreath, and really soft winter light. In this class, you'll learn how to layer from dark to light to create realistic snow. We'll use atmospheric perspective to really suggest distance with these distant trees and painted pines, with these softly painted trees here. And we're going to apply color temperature. We're going to apply color temperature like the yellows here and the blues here to really bring warmth and contrast to your winter landscape. We'll also be working on brush control and blending to really build clean edges to our barn and subtle transitions that really make this project glow. Don't forget that this tutorial is absolutely free to watch for the next 7 days. After that, it becomes part of our Kick Academy Vault. If you would like lifetime access to this class, you can tip to own it for just a few bucks. And again, that's yours for lifetime access. Now, if you are one of our Kick Academy subscribers, don't forget that this tutorial is now part of your library, along with over 600 other detailed step-by-step acrylic painting lessons. They cover everything from landscapes like this to animals, still lives, seasonal projects, and much more. Now, when you're finished your painting today, don't forget to share it in our Facebook sharing group. If you're not already a member, I'll post a link below. I see every painting that you post, and it is such a joy to celebrate your progress with you. Now, if you're ready, let's go over our supplies and then let's get started. Now, first and foremost, you're going to need something to paint on. I'm working on a size 11 by 14 inch stretched canvas, but please feel free to adjust this to any size that you would like. You can also paint in an acrylic or watercolor sketchbook if you're trying to save space. Once you have something to paint on, you're going to need some paint colors. Now, I have my colors poured out right here, and I'll go through these colors so you can get them onto your palette as well. We're of course going to use plenty of titanium white and some Mars black. We'll also be using cadmium yellow, medium hue, ultramarine blue, burnt umber brown, cadmium red, medium hue, green deep permanent, and hooker's green. And I like to pour out several dollops of that titanium white so it's ready to roll. Now, once you have something to paint on and paints, you're also going to need some paint brushes. With paint brushes, you can really choose a variety of brushes, but I'm going to show you the exact ones I've used, and I'll hold them up close so you can approximate the bristle shape and size if you're rooting through your own collection at home. So here's what I used. A number 12 flat brush, and just for reference, this particular brush is about 1 inch wide. Grab a number 6 bright brush, and just give me 1 second. Sorry about that, zooming in and out. Technical difficulties. All right, let's continue on with our brushes. So a 12 flat, we'll be using this 12 flat And also a number 6 bright brush. This brush is about 1/2 inch wide. It's a lovely square shape. For our details today, we will be using a number 0 round brush like this one, as well as a script liner like this, which is essentially like a long round brush. Grab for me a 1/4 inch flat brush. A big old bristly fan brush, and if you don't already know, you can find these brushes in the oil painting section of your local art store. We'll be using this tiny little fan brush. This is a fan brush, an acrylic fan brush in the size 10-0. If you have a wisp brush, a wisp brush is a brush with some segments cut out of the bristles. These are really fun to play with when we're texturizing things like snow, snowy roads, grass, and for today, of course, we'll use this in the snow, but also in those snow-covered pine trees. If you have a mop brush, grab one of those as well. Because we're doing a building, we're going to want to achieve some relatively straight edges. And I did just freehand my edges, but to place everything in this composition, we're going to do a really small grid. So grab yourself a ruler, a pencil, and I don't care if you use charcoal like I'm using, or watercolor pencil, or just a regular, like the kind of graphite pencil you used in school. Any drawing utensil will be great for today. Along with that, grab a big old jar of water and then some paper towels or an old rag for cleaning and drying off your brushes in between steps. A couple other things I love to paint with. I always have a spray bottle full of water handy dandy. I love getting all my paints mixed up and ready to roll so we can work in what's called wet in wet, where you blend different colors together while they're still wet. So if we're going to mix our colors to blend them wet on the canvas, one issue that can arise is they can dry out on your palette. You give it a very light misting with some water, just a light dusting on top, every 15 to 20 minutes or so. This is going to keep them nice and hydrated throughout your painting session. Another tool I always paint with, my trusty blow dryer. This is for when we have a thick layer of paint on our canvas, but we might want it to dry a little bit faster. Instead of waiting 15 minutes, you can dry it in just a few seconds with a small, I just use a travel size hair dryer like this, and it works wonders. Now that is it for our supplies, so let's go ahead and start step 1. You're going to need your ruler and a pencil for this step, so if you don't already have it, go ahead and grab it now. So the first thing we're going to do is sketch ourselves a small grid. So once you have your ruler and your pencil, let's go ahead and we'll come down the vertical axis. Now this canvas is 11 inches on its shortest side, give or take a few millimeters because of the round edges. So I just center it as best I can. And then to break this into 3 sections, it's 3.5 inches, and then we'll come up 2 more ticks. So 3.5, it's roughly 3.6, 3.7. So 3, oops, yeah, no, that's right. Measure twice, cut once. So 3.5 and then 2 more little ticks. And that breaks it equally into thirds. Now I'm going to do the same thing along the right side. I'm going to line it up and come down 3.5 and then 2 little ticks. 3.5 and then measure your last segment to make sure it's right. There we go. And then you're going to sketch across. Now we're going to come across the long side of our canvas at 14 inches. If you're on an 11 by 14 like me, if you're on a different size, just break it into thirds. It's going to be 4.5 inches. And again, plus 2 or 3 little ticks. So 4.5. And then measure the last one to make sure it's roughly the same dimension. And let's come across the top. And always measure that last one to make sure that it's as close to thirds as possible. And then we're going to come down the vertical orientation here. And now we're going to do a little bit of sketching within these guidelines. This is a really loosey-goosey painting, and the snow on this painting is really going to help loosen up our structure. So I don't want you to worry about it being perfect. My favorite thing about snowy scenes is, again, a billowy piece of snow coming over the edge of the barn can really cover all manner of air quote mistakes. But let's try to get these as straight as we can for now, and we can loosen it up either by a happy accident or with some snow later on. So I'm going to do one more line, and I might just rough this in really lightly. I'm going to come through my center because the peak of our barn is actually just a little bit right of center. If you want to measure this, of course you can. Half of 14 inches is 7. Bloop. I'm pretty close to right on here, so I'm happy with my center line. Right now, we're going to do the rough outline of this barn. I'm just lightly sharpening my charcoal. Because it's so soft, it loses its tip really fast. So I've got to sharpen this regularly. All right, so here we go. If we look at this center third, let's come just inside this third. Actually, let's do this line first. To begin, you guys, we're going to draw this lower rectangle for the body of the building. All right. So I want you to come. Let's do one more line, kind of halfway through this center section. Just draw this really lightly for me, and it does not have to be perfect. So let's come just above this center line. And let's draw across like this and come over the right side vertical line a little bit. This is going to represent this big white post here. And then for the side of the rectangle, we're going to come just on the inside line of this segment here. So right here, compared to this center grid. We're also going to come just a little bit on the outside of this line here, like this. Now this represents the lower part of our building. So now we're going to find the center of this rectangle. So imagine away all of your other lines for me for now. And I want you to cut this in half, and it should roughly look like 2 squares or 2 rectangles. You can measure if you like, but I'm just going to eyeball mine like this. So that is the new center of our building, and we can follow our center line up past the center third, and we're going to come up to the peak of our barn. We're basically just going to draw ourselves a line right through the center to help us keep everything aligned. So the center of my door should be aligned with the peak of the roof. And that roof comes pretty high up, doesn't it? A little something like this. Take your time and have fun. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start in on the slopes of the roof. And they kind of come in like this on a bit of an angle. They're going to come up over this third line a little bit. So they're going to kind of come up on an angle, a little something like this. And because they're angling in, and draw this line just on the outside here. This is kind of like the width of the roof. So it's going to sit a little bit over the edge of this line on each side like this. To make sure I get my angle correct, I like to draw a line across, making sure it kind of is equal on each side. And then when I pull this down, we should have a symmetrical-ish shape. So as long as it comes out equally here and here and here and here, then this shape is going to be symmetrical. And now we're going to slope in towards the top of the barn. You can bring it up even higher if you want. Then it would just be a steeper angle like this. All right. Now we're going to draw a little line to represent the barn doors, or a little squarish rectangle type shape. So I like to almost cut each of these halves in half again, like this, for the whole width of the door. We're going to come really close to the line at the top. And we're just going to sketch across the width of the door and down. And by the way, for straight lines, I don't just draw up like this. I always kind of I wiggle my pencil back and forth as I'm drawing up. It gives me a lot of stability for my lines. And this is all, don't worry about any of the details in the door, so we'll paint those on later on. Our wreath is going to sit, roughly kind of like this. So a bit more in the lower part of the barn, in the lower third, I should say here. Okay. And we do not by any means have to paint this in yet, because we got to paint the barn first. But I like having a rough idea of where the opening, like right here, in the wreath is going to be. Okay. So a little something like this. And we're going to have a window. I believe this is the hay loft. Thank you to all my barn knowledgeable friends. I've learned so much from you. This little kind of rectangular window, I always just think of, I've never owned a barn or lived on a farm. I've definitely lived in the woods, but not on a farm. So I need all the hay terminology or barn terminology that's legit that you can give me. So this, I believe, is a hay loft. And whatever is the width of this window, I like to pull the two, my barn doors are a little bit wide. I like to pull in whatever section is available to you down here, whatever the width. Let's pull a window of a similar size or opening down here like this. I might go a little closer to my roof, so I've got a bit more room for my trees down there. All right. So just roughing it in like this. Now the door is going to end just a little bit above the third line, so you might want to use the side of your pencil and just shade it in so we know that's kind of where the actual bottom of the barn is going to sit. All right, let's keep going. This was the hardest part. So this is looking straight-ish and symmetrical-ish. You are doing awesome. let's come into this side of the barn here. And I have if we were to come over, let's start at the edge where the roof meets the body of the barn. We're going to draw across just a little bit below the pitch of the roof. So we're going to come across about 2/3 of the way into this segment. So if I were to roughly kind of block this into thirds like this, the bottom of this roof is going to come over about 2/3 of the way. I'm going to drag it over a little bit further just so that if the tree doesn't overlap everything, we've got some extra barn that we can pull the tree on top of. So we're bringing this line about 2/3 of the way into this section of our grid. And the roof itself, the top of this roof, is going to sit just below this line here. And it's not going to come in, it's going to not come out as far as this line. So we're going to start just below right here so that we can angle it down like that. So the top of the roof is shorter than the bottom, so we can get this cool angle coming up like this. All right. And now we have another section of the barn up here, and I'm going to snuggle in, you guys. So from here, I'm going to make this the line I actually use. So you can just draw lots of lines and then just darken whatever line you're actually going to use so you don't get lost. So here, this is going to line up pretty much with this third line. This one right here. Come just a little bit over the edge of the roof here and draw straight down. This too is going to come up on an angle. And then in right about where the barn bends, for the highest pitch of the roof here, a little something like this. And I have a little window in this part of the barn, similar size and shape to these guys. Don't worry about these details down here. We're going to pull them in after we get those trees on so we can make them symmetrical-ish. Our barn, we're seeing ever so slightly as if we're standing a little bit more on the right-hand side. So we're actually seeing a tiny bit extra in the roof over here. Just a tiny bit extra, okay? And then right where the edge of the roof meets the bottom of the building here, I want you to draw straight down again and come about half. If we look at this entire third here, I know there's stuff in this side, but imagine the whole third and kind of cut it in half. And that's about where we stop seeing the barn because it's going to be covered up by this big old pine tree right here. Okay. All right. Follow the edge of the roof a little something like this. Okay. And leave it just open like this. We don't have to close that up or anything. The last thing I want you to sketch is your path. So we're going to pull on a few lines to outline the path and where the snow meets that path. So our big old road leading up to our barn. I want you to start just below this third line right here. So just below this third line, we're going to come across. We're going to come towards to the center line down here is where we're kind of angling. We're going to come over, then we're going to start at this third line, start arcing down, and we're going to go a little something like this. It's a pretty sharp turn down here. And then we're just going to see a thin strip of road here. And then think about it kind of opening up a little bit. And we're going to come right over to here like this. So it's getting quite a bit bigger at the bottom and slowly getting smaller towards the back. That's for perspective, because from where we're standing, this is closer to us. Like if this was a picture we took, this is closer to us, so it's larger. So to create that look of perspective, we're going to flatten it out a little bit and make it smaller as we go back. All right, so we're going to have this road fork off towards I can't say the word fork off without giggling like a schoolgirl because of the show The Good Place. If you haven't seen it, it's philosophical and super funny. Okay, So we're gonna have our road fork off towards the bottom of these doors. Let's angle it up and have it come and join the road here. And where it joins the road here, I want the path to be about the road to be the same width here as it is here. Just kind of going in a different direction. All right, you guys are doing great. Just so you understand where all the elements sit in this composition, I'm going to show you just a very basic, we'll use a very basic triangle shape to sketch in these trees. So the pinnacle of this tree, you can actually see the tip of the tree in this far upper left-hand corner. So it's like the center, the trunk of this tree would actually be like right here, like this. And then the tree, I'm just going to use kind of a triangle shape to represent it. It's kind of coming down and all the way to the top of this path. It's actually kind of growing in the snow right in front of this path. So the basic shape is going to be triangle-ish like this. We're seeing a bit of a peak there, okay? And it's coming in front of the path, like down here. And then over on the other side, we're going to have another triangle-ish shape kind of sitting just in the snow here. And you can draw the center first. It's going to be pretty close to the edge of the painting. And we're going to see a little something like this, just to remind us of what we've got going on. All right, our sketch is done. Take your time with this section of your project. And when you're ready, meet me back here and we're going to mix the colors for our sky. I know it looks like a really plain light colored sky, but there's actually a few layers of color in there. So if I hold up close, you can see those distant trees. There is blue in there, and then there's like a soft yellow to the sky, and then the snow too. It's not just white. So to create that realistic snow, we want to see shadows in there and colors from the atmosphere, like the sky, that bit of yellow in the sky, picking it up in the snow as well. So we're going to begin with the cool colors before we get into that yellow. Grab a brush, like a number 6 bright brush. And let's start by taking a large dollop of white. And I'm working in the upper part of my palette here. So a big dollop of white. I'm going to swirl all that white off my brush, and I'm going to come into just a little bit of yellow for that whole, like the dollop of white is like this. And I've got just this tiny bit of yellow because I want this to be a soft color. So it's like barely yellow. Maybe just a little bit more. Add little tiny pinpricks until you get a nice kind of pale, buttery yellow. Very light value. And if you're not familiar with the term value, it just means a range of light colors to mid-tone colors to dark colors. Okay, so this is our first color swatch here. It's a really beautiful kind of pale yellow. I'm going to hold it up close. Here it is. Now I also want you to take some white and add a little bit of blue to some white as well. So this should give us a really, really pale ultramarine blue. A little something like this. You can go even lighter than this if you like. And now you'll notice that there isn't really much saturated ultramarine blue in there. So we're going to create a more realistic neutral blue-gray color. So So what I'd like you to do is take equal scoops of ultramarine blue and burnt umber brown and mix them together. And then let's add 1 extra scoop of blue. So it's like 2 parts ultramarine to 1 part brown. This is going to create more of like a grayish color. So we're going to make a value that's a little bit darker than this light pale blue. So I'm going to take a couple scoops of white and I'm going to add 1 scoop of this bluish gray. And I want you to see this next to the plain ultramarine blue. You can see how the brown grays it out. And the reason for that is because brown is full of orange. And orange and blue are complementary colors. And whenever you mix complementary colors, even if you don't just mix straight orange and blue, if a color has orange in it and you mix it with its complementary, it will neutralize it. It will make it more of like a natural sort of landscape style color. So here is the 2 parts blue to 1 part brown with some white, going for kind of a medium value. So it's not as dark as black. It's kind of like a medium blue gray. And you can see this color in the distant trees and in some of the shadows in our snow. So if you're ready, let's get some of these in here. And I love just using my bristly fan brush and a mop brush. So let's start. I'm going to add more white to this ultramarine. So I'm going to take some pure white on my brush, then grab a little bit of this ultramarine blue because I want it to be a pretty light color. And I'm going to wiggle it around, just kind of like the upper half of the sky. And I'm going to paint around my edges. Just to be really light. Don't worry about going over your tree triangles. I'll add that snowy width to this part of the roof later on. Our other tree is going to be in here, but for now I'm just going to pull right down. I've got a nice juicy amount of this color, like enough that I can see some of my brush strokes in there, see up close. Got lots of color on there. And you don't have to take the time to wrap around the edges if you don't want to. All right, so now we're going to insinuate some of these distant trees. So I'm going to take some of that smoky gray color and I'm going to paint right over this evergreen so that I can focus now on these trees. And I can still see my 3rd line here. These trees really kind of just come up, maybe a little bit above that 3rd line, and they'll grow as we blend together. So let's start maybe just above that 3rd line. Okay. And now that I've got that on there, I'm going to wipe off my fan brush and anything that can make this look a little bit texture, like if you pull up or down with your fan brush to make it look like really distant branches. They're so small, you can't really see individual branches, but this overall texture, that it's not a straight line. Like it's broken, like these are branches sticking up and out. They're going to come in a little something like this. And same thing here, like a little bit. We have a bit above the roof of my barn, and I'm going to overlap this tree a little bit here too. And I'm going to create some little kind of round shapes blending into that light blue. Don't worry about going over some of the edges of your barn, but just soften this in, wet and wet to that blue. In fact, another brush that I love using to create this texture is the mop brush. And you can get your mop brush wet. And then, so I wet mine in my jar of water, and then I tap it off, and I'm trying to open the bristles so I get some funky texture. And then I'll use this at the edge. I might actually add a bit more paint, but I want it to look kind of like a stamp. Like I don't want it to be a soft, straight blend, and I might, oh yeah, there we go, look at that. There's some, maybe that's too high up, but I'll tweak it later. All right. Nestle this right into kind of the sides of your buildings. And then if you want, you can wrap some of this color around the sides. Rinse off your brush, and I'm going to use the mop brush again. You can continue with that bristly fan. I want to keep this fun edge to my mop brush. I'm going to go into some of that really pale yellow. And I'm going to pull a little bit down, leaving some areas of pure blue. And I might take some of this sky down just a little bit, some of these trees down. I'm just going to soften these edges. They're so far away, so we're not seeing a lot of contrast, just a little. And later on, we'll put some like delicate branches in there too. Yes, I'm using some of this light yellowy color to take down the height of a few of my little trees here. And we already have these subtle shifts of the pale yellow with the pale blue because they're such pale colors. They're not going to mix into a green if you keep them really light. I'm just going to tweak my new top to this tree, which is a little bit smaller, but again, nice and soft. Little bits of texture. Now, if you've never heard the term atmospheric perspective before, it refers to capturing the look of distance and depth in a painting. On a cold day like this, the air is often a bit more of a blue or gray color. So using kind of the color of the air, in this case, or the sky color, this kind of blue hue in the distant trees, because there's so much air between the trees and the viewer, they do pick up the color of the sky. So if this was a red sunset, of course, these would be red shifted, not blue shifted. But because it's a wintry landscape, we often see that blue gray tinge in distant objects, and they also lose detail. So they're going to pick up the color of the sky, and they might be a little bit more misty or blended than like sharp contrast, like the barn, which is close to us. I just love painting these marks, so I'm tweaking mine quite a bit. Just trying to get that perfect kind of edge to my mop brush. All right. Now, once we have our sky and our distant trees, we're going to add a little bit of an outline to our barn. So keep those snow colors. If you feel like they're going to dry out on your palette, give it a light misting on top. Now I want you to grab some black. And with your bright brush, we're going to add some water into some black to create shadows right in the underpainting of our barn. So I'm going to take a small scoop of black, like the one I poured out right here. And I'm going to grab just kind of a toothpaste sized dollop of that, and I'm going to drip water into it till my paint is a little bit more runny, which will make it see-through. And it will also allow it to flow really nicely to create straight edges. So first thing, let's come basically along our drawing. This will help act as a shadow underneath the top of the lower section of the building there. And we'll add the snow on top of this shadow. You can paint right over that white color. Just use a brush like the one I'm using here. This is my number 6 bright. And it has a beautiful flat edge like this. Come along the edge of the barn. And the sides of the barn. All right, the roof of the barn. It's going to come out like this, but it's going to be covered by the tree, so there's no reason to kind of end that. You could even come along the bottom of the barn a little bit. The roof over here. And here. I'm even going to take a little bit of this black on my bright brush. And I'm going to pull in these windows. Our hayloft. These guys. If you thin some paint out even more, and then tap your brush off on a napkin, you can use that kind of see-through black to kind of fill in the hole where we want our wreath to be. Like our wreath is going to be here, and that's just really see-through black. I might do the same around the outs, or I'm going to come through the center of my door. The doors are going to fit in here. All right, now once you've got that kind of really runny black, like if you can really thin some out, so it's kind of see-through, then I want you to come along the edge of the roof underneath with some of that see-through black, kind of all along the edge here. And then tap off your brush even more, so there's no paint left on it hardly at all, and pull down. This is called a wash when we have a see-through color, and it's done with water. So I might add some of this see-through black under my wreath as like a shadow. The shadow will be a bit darker here because the sun is coming down this way. I'm going to rinse off my brush and come back in with some of these more see-through bands of paint. Just creating. Now you can use the fat side of your brush for larger marks and turn it up the long skinny way for some smaller marks. Okay, let's take some of this see-through black under the roof here. Then you can wipe your brush off. So you're basically just using a clean, damp brush to pull down whatever see-through black you've got in here. And this is a way to add shading into your painting right in the undercoat, in the base layer. This is particularly helpful when you're using the more see-through colors. Like a teal is not a see-through color, and so this kind of shading wouldn't work. But some colors in acrylic are really see-through, like red, orange, yellow, and green. So the blues aren't see-through. The whites are definitely not see-through. I'm gonna plop in this little window there. And again, going into some of that really watery black right under here. And it can be a bit more shaded on the sides of the barn here. They're a little further back from the front of the barn. So you can have fun with this technique. It kind of bleeds like watercolor. So one of my favorite things about acrylic is they can behave very much like watercolors when we use them in this fashion. All right, so I got that runny black there. I'm gonna tap my brush off and just use a clean brush now with some water to pull down. Then maybe grab a little bit more of the dark black for a few. Bit of contrast, some darker bands too. Okay. I might darken under the roof a little bit more and pull a few more dark bands down here. Now, when you feel happy with the shading in your barn, and we're going to go over this with quite a few layers of red, well, 2 layers of red, a base coat, some highlights. So get it to a point where you're happy with it. And if you have too much darkness or you feel like not enough, play with it. And don't worry if it gets too dark, because we can lighten the barn with highlights. And just to show you the difference, I actually liked the look of that really deep red barn. Here's one where I did the shadowing a bit lighter. I've added more snow to the trees. This barn is a bit more kind of classic barn color. And I love learning about the history of colors. And the reason barns were so red was out of practicality, out of function. So farmers we didn't have kind of the latex-based paints that we have today. So back in the day, all that was really available were kind of homemade milk paints where they mixed iron oxide with milk to create this paint that would go on their barn. So it's really the only material they had. And we've kind of kept that tradition going, which I think is beautiful. So you can go for the darker shading or the lighter shading, and you can tweak that in subsequent layers. So let's get it on. And now we're going to move down into the snow in the lower part of our painting. But first, let's give this a blast. Now we're going to go back into those same snowy colors that we used to paint into our sky. And I'm going to begin with that bristly fan brush again. I'm going to start with some of that grayish blue color. Maybe add a bit of these two colors together so it's a little bit lighter. I'm going to pull this along the side of the road right here. So the sun's coming down this way. So this bit of snow sort of represents the width of this snowbank along the road. It's going to show you kind of how deep our snowy pile is. I made that a bit of this bluish color kind of along the edge of the barn. I'm going to use my fan brush to keep it just really soft. I'm going to kind of tap around. There's little snow and ice crystals everywhere. Okay. I'm going to take a bit of this blue into, we've got the bottom of our tree here. I can still see it. So I might add a bit more blue, maybe even grabbing a bit more of the pure ultramarine. This is where the base of our tree is going to sit. The bottom of some snowbanks. And just like the sky, it's going to look a bit darker and more colorful in the first layer, and we'll build on top of that. So here too, we've got the width of this snowbank. It's kind of coming down like this. Rinse off that brush. Rinse, rinse, rinse. Tap, tap, tap. That extra water go into some of that whitish yellow. And let's pull some along the edge of that road. And down towards our blue. And just keep it really soft to start. And in this side, so we've got the snow kind of coming up towards the barn, up towards the base of the tree, kind of sweeping up. And then this is the hill kind of coming down on the little edge of the snow. So don't worry if these all kind of moosh together. We just want to block out the general areas of shadow and highlights. Now we're going to mix a few more colors now. So I want you to take some of your burnt umber brown and we're going to use some plain burnt umber brown. And then we're also going to use, so we'll have some plain burnt umber brown in there, which is just this lovely, nice dark brown color like this. And then we're also going to mix some of our burnt umber brown with some white. So then we're going to have a little bit of a lighter brown like this. And now I want you to take 1 scoop of burnt umber brown and a couple scoops of yellow. Let's start with 2 to 3 parts yellow to 1 part brown. And this should make more of a warm brown color. Like this. So here's that plain burnt umber plus white. This is about 3 parts yellow to 1 part brown. Makes a bit of a warmer color. And if we add white to this, it's going to make a really pretty light warm brown. Like this. We're going to use these colors plus white in our path, and I'm going to pull them in. The only technique here is kind of pulling in patches of color sort of in the direction that the vehicles would be driving down the road. So kind of follow the path up and over and here, over and up. Start with some just patches of color and then we'll lightly feather them together. Okay, if you're ready, let's hop to it. So I might start with some of my plain burnt umber brown. Add a bit of water to your color if you like. And I'm going to add a few little, like here's our path. Get a bit of that dark color right under the, don't worry if it blends in with your blues, it's all good. This bit of the road is going to come out here and attach here. And then I might take some of that lighter burnt umber brown with the white. And then I might take some of that light golden color. Okay, so I've got some patches of paint. Now I'm going to rinse off my bright brush and I'm going to start to just lightly feather these together. Adding more color as we go. This is just the first coat, so nothing has to be perfect here. But let's get on a nice base for our path. While we're letting the snow dry, I want to add some distant branches into our trees here. So grab your script liner. Grab your script liner. My hubby Don we just got back from like a month-long trip to visit my mom in Boston, and it is so nice to be at my in-home studio. We didn't get to harvest our pumpkins in October, so out my window he's holding up all of our biggest pumpkins and gourds and waving them around like treasure. It's fantastic. Okay. So grab your script liner brush, and we're going to use the same color that we used in the distant trees, just a little bit darker. And I might add a little bit more brown. So this is a mixture of ultramarine blue and brown. And I'm going to kind of take this color here. I'm going to add a little more brown to it. Whatever color your background is, this should be just a little bit darker, maybe one shade darker than the color you have on here. And then drip lots of water into the color that you've made. So I'll show you my color here. I use quite a bit of this color in my background. So it's kind of the same value. I've just added a bit more brown to it. There we go. Now we need the water in there for the script liner to be able to work. The script liner with its long bristle works best with watery paint. This whole tip soaks it up. So my favorite thing to do is add water to the paint and then fill the bristles itself. So I've wet this brush. I don't know if you can tell it's shiny now and the bristles are all together. So I've wet this brush because water attracts water. So this water will soak up the water in the paint, making it kind of ink-like. So the paint's just gonna right up in here. And then we're gonna make some branchy, distant tree-like shapes. Using that thinned out paint is gonna make it a lot easier. All right, here we go. So to make these branches, you gotta go into that thin paint. See how there's kind of a drip at the tip of my brush? I'm gonna tip that off. I'm gonna tap it off. I wanna make really thin lines. So I'm gonna tap, tap, tap. It's so full of paint. This will last a long time. Now we're gonna make shapes a little something like this. So this is kind of like the tips of trees. So we're not necessarily seeing a lot of trunks. We might see, imagine the trunk is kind of in behind the barn. This is a distant tree, so we're just seeing a lot of the kind of side branches, the lateral branching, like this. And then we might come off of these shapes with even smaller V shapes. Especially at those tips. So especially at the tips of this shape, you know, the barn is going to kind of cover it. So we're just kind of seeing the tips of some of these. So we might get little lines like this. And then turn them into V's, and then smaller kind of Y's at the ends. Okay. Add lots of water to your paint. All right. A brief intermission because Don wants to show off our biggest, nubbliest pumpkins.
One.
We've got a big old nubbly bubbly.
It's a pretty heavy one.
Oh, I can't hold it. And then this guy is pretty massive. We should bring the one with the eyes on it.
Yeah, I'll bring that next. Got a couple bins.
Okay, let's get into those distant trees. Warning, I may show off a few more of our pumpkins. So come into this distant tree line, get that brush wet, dip into the paint. Remember, the trunks are kind of down here. So this is kind of the overall habit or shape of the tree. So you might just see a few of these branches kind of coming up like this. This can be really subtle. And sometimes they'll even just kind of have disembodied branches just because they're so far away, just at the tips of these shapes. Like there's probably a forest back here, right? So there's a lot of wiggle room for just kind of getting in there and making marks. Like some of my marks aren't even attached to the trunk. All right. Now our tree's going to be in here, but I want to have a few more. Like there's another little guy. So my tree will be here. Like maybe there's a whole other distant tree back here. Then one in front of it. Yeah, so you can just get a bunch of these branch-like marks. And, you know, if you picture our triangle shape, our tree is going to cover some of this guy. All right. And over here, I definitely have some tree action going on. I start with a few main branches, and then I often will go zig, zag, zig, zag. So go one way and then the other. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Like there's this really, once my brush runs out of paint, then I come into these little areas here. Have fun with it, and if you don't like your trees, you can always go over them with your mop brush and just mist parts out with a little paint later on. But I like having these really subtle branches. I love seeing the bare branches, like the whole scaffolding of trees in winter. They're so beautiful. So we're going to add some whites and lighter colors into the sky and snow later on. But for now, it's time to add that first juicy coat of red into that barn. We already have the shadows there, so we can let this dry naturally, but I don't know about you, I often end up smudging with my hand. So let's give this a blast with the blow dryer. And I'm going to mist these paints a little more. Here we go. And now we pause our regularly scheduled program to take a quick peek at a few more pumpkins. So we painted some blue pumpkins earlier this year, and I just wanted to show you. There are actual blue pumpkins, and they're usually more of like a kind of grayish, smoky teal. And you know we would actually mix this out of ultramarine blue, burnt umber brown with a little bit of green deep permanent. This is called a Jarradale, and it's a beautiful teal gourd. It's bright orange on the inside, and it's the sweetest, one of the sweetest pumpkins I have ever tried. This one looks super gross, but these little, it's a pink pumpkin and it's got these little eyes on it. And these little eyes are actually pockets of sugar that come to the surface of the pumpkin. So creepy for Halloween, also super sweet to eat. I'll just show you one more. This is a tiny gourd. And it grows two-tone, also super sweet, and you can cook and eat the flesh of this particular pumpkin. And I grew a new one this year. It's a little kind of Japanese pumpkin. And I love it because it's pretty much like cadmium orange. This might have been the orangest pumpkin I've ever grown. All right, that's enough showing off our pumpkins. Wait, one more. How perfect is this little cutie? And now back to our regularly scheduled program. Grab some of your cadmium red medium hue, and we're going to go back to our number 6 bright brush. And we're going to glaze just a plain cadmium red medium right over top of that black. This paint is so see-through naturally that you don't even have to thin it out. We can just come right into our red. Okay, and you can pick up a nice juicy dollop. And we're going to come right over top of those blacks, and it's like we have our shading done for us in the underpainting. Now, even though we're not using glazing liquid, this is a form of glaze painting where you put a see-through layer of color on top of another layer so that both colors show through and kind of blend together optically. So we're not physically blending these together because the one color is dry. We're layering the color, and our eye blends them together as light passes through the color. Come right down. This is why we've just got that one coat of snow on there now. We're going to touch it up in the next coat. So don't be shy to kind of wiggle that red right in towards the ground line in this layer. Sometimes I find it easier just to pass right over top of the black windows at this phase. Come right up to the edges of your wreath, even overlap it a little bit. If you want to add any more shading into your barn, now's the time. And you can blend the black right into the red. But one of my favorite things to do is to take 2 scoops of red and then just kind of half a scoop of black and mix it together. And it's going to create a dark burgundy color. You know, you hear all these rules like don't mix black with your colors, but that's just silly. Black is also a beautiful value to be added to color, and it creates lovely neutrals as well. So here's black mixed with red, and it does create a lovely deep burgundy color like this. If I were to thin this out, you do get to see the beautiful hue of this shine through. You can see the tone of this, almost like a wine red, isn't it? So we can use this to add shadows as well, especially if you saw the 2 barns I showed you earlier and you liked that darker red. It's nice to get a little bit of this in. Okay, right on top. I'm gonna add a few of these streaks. There's an extra bit of shadowing under your wreath or under the roof of the barn. You can kind of enhance the pattern that you've already got. Now while we're here, tap off your brush and go into some black. And if you painted over your windows like me, it's a great time to just pop those back in like this. And from here, I want you to rinse your brush. And I want to mix a little bit more of my burnt umber and yellow together. This time I'm going to have a little bit more brown, but it's just kind of a brownish yellow. And let's go ahead and fill in our door with a nice coat of this color. We've got almost every aspect painted in here. Now we're giving that first coat to our door. So get that base coat into your barn doors, and then let's put a little bit of paint into the roof of our barn. Remember that light is coming down this way, so the barn itself is casting a little bit of shadow on the roof that is closest to the barn before it comes out into white. I actually start with the lightest yellow color and add the white after. So all of the snow has these subtle shifts of color between yellow and white and blue that is most visible up close in the painting and adds a little extra bit of depth and dimension. You might want to take a minute to rinse off your brushes if they're sitting in their watery home so that they're ready to go for the next steps. So take a little bit of one of your kind of shadowy blue colors, like one of these two, and we'll add it into the roof that is closest to the barn where it's casting its own shadow. Rinse off your brush and go into that nice kind of yellowish white color. That really baby yellowy white. And we want to go right over top of those blacks at the top. That was just a placeholder so we didn't lose the barn as we were filling in the background. And come into some of that yellowy white into the roof on the other side. You can even grab a little bit of plain white for this side. Come right over that black outline. And then do go into some of your kind of blue color, bluish white, and pull a little line across the top of the pitch of the roof here. There's going to be that shadowy underside of the snow, just right atop the black parts. Wipe off your brush and then go into some pure white and add a thin line of pure white right on top of the blue. The blue here is the shadow part of the snow, showing the width of the snow. And use a brush with a nice pointy tip and add the white right on top. Now, if you have a mini fan, it's actually really good at these lines too. Let me show you this little guy. So if you take this brush here, and we think about using that fine edge, I'm just going to dip it into the white like this. Okay, and we're going to use that edge. Then you can tap along. This is a beautiful brush for doing edges. Now let's go ahead and widen the width of the roof just a little bit on this side. Just a little bit. I'm going to take a bit of pure white into the very edge. I'm grabbing a decent amount of paint into this side of the roof here. Make sure you've gone over all those black outlines, and you can just fade this down the roof. Come along the tip, and it can even be a bit messy as you blend this in, because if we were to say pull down even a few bits like this, it does start to look like snow, doesn't it? A little bit of the snow coming down. I do not feel ready for snow yet, but it is coming. I can feel it. It's in the air. It is beautiful to paint though, isn't it? We're going to mix a couple of greens now as we start to block in our trees before we get into adding the little details into the focal part of our barn. So grab a bright brush, and I want you to rinse any white off your brush, a scoop of your green deep permanent, and mix it with a scoop of your ultramarine blue, and I do this in about equal parts. I'm actually going to add one more scoop of the green. It should be a really, really dark bluish green. Like this. Okay. And if we add a little bit of white to this color, you can really see that it's a kind of bluey green like this. And it does go really beautifully when you see this green with the two reds together. It's a really neutral green, but when you see it kind of with the cadmium red pop and then these colors here, they just really make each other stand out. There are different brushes you can use for pulling in the base of your trees, but I recommend grabbing that bristly fan brush. Go into this dark blue-green, and let's start with this big one here. So remember, the tip of this tree is going to be sitting about here, and it's coming down in front of our path. I might start with a bigger fan brush for this and just load half. I'm going to come into this dark blue-green, and we might have the boughs on the bottom. Remember, we're going to kind of come up. So the overall shape is going to be kind of like a triangle, like this, where it's going to get bigger towards the top. But we're going to have some boughs come out of this. So down here, we might have a big bough, and I come down like this. And then we might have another one. And look at this. This bough starts like almost where the roof starts up here, like they're big. So we might have another one. We could even flip the end up just a little bit. Okay. And then we have another one coming coming down and over the barn. See, like this. Okay, so we've got 3 kind of big boughs down here, and then we're really going to start getting a bit smaller towards the top of our tree. So now I'm going to use just the very edge of this brush and maybe have one, let's say, coming down, getting even smaller, just using the tippy tip of the brush. And kind of just tapping uneven lines towards the top. Okay, so this tree over here, we've got the base on. And now over here, it's kind of the same, where we're going to have the top of the tree over here. And it's going to be kind of basically like a triangle shape, sitting just below the barn. We want to pull some different branches and boughs out of the tree. And again, for this guy, have some kind of bigger ones on the bottom. This guy's going to run off the page for sure. Now as the tree gets taller, the little boughs of the tree will get smaller too. A lot of them are really weighed down towards the ground because it's heavy with snow. So here we've got the kind of base shadow, the underpainting of our tree. Now I'm going to switch to my mini fan, and I want to pull some of the shadowy color for a couple of trees into this area too. I might just use the edge of this and some of this color. Like we've got a few shrubs growing around our barn. And let's do a few on the other side here too. While the trees are still wet, I like pulling in my next coat of snow here. Rinse off that bristly fan. I'm going to make sure I have a little bit of my whitish yellow available still. Now take a little bit of that light sky blue color, and let's pull just a little bit underneath our trees. This is kind of the shadow of the tree here. And I like to soften this in just a little bit. So I pull it on, then I wipe the brush off. And I might just very lightly kind of soften this in, just so it's not a hard edge. I'm going to rinse off my brush. And now I'm going to come into some pure white, not the yellowy white, some pure white. And think about leaving a bit of the shadow around the width of the snow here. And now pull some of this white like it's a bank kind of coming up and in towards the tree. Some white on my brush like this. And here comes that snow. Can maybe add a little bit of that blue shadow under the bushes. Don't worry if a bit of the green gets in there, it's all good. Just keep it soft and scrub some of that light blue. I even have a bit of the green from the tree in here. And come into some white in the snow here. And here, kind of pull it up and into the tree, like the snow is kind of piling. You can swoop up or down. You can bring a bit more snow over the path here. Like here, kind of making it a bit smaller. I like to add a little bit more of my light blue, this color, just into the base. I'm not covering everything. I got the white on there, so now I'm just going to kind of blend it in a loose fashion. If you want to have a bit of the yellow light in there too, you can put a bit of that on top. Getting a bit of the sky color into the snow. Just a little bit bluer on the shadowy sides of things. Now while we're here, we're going to do the final coat in the snow and into the sky. So rinse off that fan brush and grab some of your light yellow color, just a bit, on a clean, damp fan brush. And I'm going to pull some of this in to the sky. Starting at the top and letting some of the blue shine through. I'm just kind of scrubbing it in. Starting at the top, pulling. Now my brush is mostly dry with paint, so just lightly, maybe hovering over the edge of the trees. And here, if you don't like your branches, you can go back into some of that blue and hover over top. I like the look of my distant trees, but if I wanted to, mute them out a little bit, it's not hard to do. You just come back into your color and just kind of go over top of any areas you don't like. The color is similar to the background, okay? If I didn't like my branches, I would match a color as close as I could, and I come on up in here. Okay. So now we've got that light color in the sky and onto the snow. Cameras always kind of lose yellow unless it's up close, but it is this buttery yellow. If I want to back up, it kind of makes it look more white, but it is that lovely pale color. Now, as our trees are drying, I like to come into the path in a second pass with a bit more detail, and I like giving a little bit of a second coat into the door as well because it's a little bit thin. I'm going to take that yellowy brown into these panels and just give it a good light coat here. Then back into these colors. Let's add a few more in here. Now less is more. So the first time we were putting color all over. This time let's go a little bit less, and let's even use a more of a wispy brush like the fan or even a wisp brush. Use your fan or your mini fan here. Almost get a little white in there. Like there's some snow in the path. Any of your darkest darks will show up a little bit better now too. And just keep this really loose, and once you've got some color on there, you can scrub it together with a clean damp fan. To finish it off, I add a little bit of white to my fan brush, and I'm just going to do a little kind of dusting with the snow. You can soften the edges of where the path meets the snow. Everything is going to be soft in this weather. Kind of like soften the edges like this. Just lightly tickle the canvas with this little bit of white at the tip of the fan. And just lightly graze some of this dusting of snow. Don't do long strokes, do shorter strokes. Soften those edges. Sometimes I'll even go in a little more white, especially right along here. These big old snow banks. I like to pull little bits of white kind of in between the little trees sometimes, or make it a bit messy along that line. Okay. Now let's give this a dry, and we're going to get into the details into our trees and barn to finish off this scene. So we've got all the base coats in now. Grab your blow dryer and let's give this a blast. And now we're going to come into the detail on the barn doors. So we're going to take some paint and we're going to come around the edges with a pretty thick line of white, or not white first. We're going to use a medium kind of color. And then we're going to have a double thickness in the center. And then we're going to kind of want to know where the center of the door is after we have the border onto the door. We're going to want to know where roughly center is, because we're going to then pull down 2 X's within each section, a little something like this. So we're going to get this kind of pattern here. Okay. And grab a little brush, like a 1/4 inch flat. And let's first come into our kind of bluey, one of these bluey gray colors. Come along the bottom. And come along the sides. And along the top. If you want, you can take a dark color, even like a little bit of black or your bluish green, any dark color, and you can kind of come through the center of the gates. This. And then we're going to come right through this pattern. We start with this shadow for white so that it doesn't just look flat. This is raised, so the sun's going to create a shadow on it, and the individual bits of raised wood themselves are also going to have a shadow. So for shadows for white, again, I'm picking up the color of the atmosphere, the color of the sky for that shadow. Now within these beams, there's going to be a shadow underneath. So take a look here. So remember, our sun is coming down from this direction. So we've got the shadow on the roof here cast by the barn, like the light's hitting here and blocking a bit of the light there. The same thing here, it's coming down from the top. So in these raised bits of wood are casting a shadow underneath these elements, just like underneath the wreath. So being aware of our light source. For this, you're going to take some of that dark ultramarine blue and brown we mixed together. So let's go with 2 parts blue to 1 part brown, and even add a little titch of red in there. The nice dark shadowy color, kind of like a homemade black color. So it looks almost black, but it's got little hints of blue in there. So there'll be a shadow. Now underneath here, like this. Underneath this panel here. These little details of a realistic light source can really make our paintings pop. Now I want you to take some of our whitish blue, that original kind of whitish blue like this one, and we'll go ahead and put the panes, the border around the windows. Use a little flat brush for this. Come into this blue color, and whatever brush gives you a better straight line, I'm going to use my mini fan. I'm going to come into some of my light blue, and I'm going to come along this, leaving some of the dark color underneath as like a shadow. And even if this doesn't look straight, like it's got some blobbies, I actually added some blobbies into this later on so that it would look like snow has piled up on here. Like there's been a snowstorm and the snow's sitting right on top of all of these trees and shrubs in a beautiful way. So I have a few more little details into the barn. Kind of like, I'm going to put a little door kind of in between the side of the barn and this tree, like this. And then two more little windows on the side. I love buildings. They always look like faces to me. Like these look like eyes, and the door kind of looks like a mouth. When I was in university, I did a series of drawings of buildings that looked like people. It was fun. Here. There we go. So a couple more little details, and we'll do these in the dark, kind of bluey gray color, our shadow white. You can add a little water to help your paint flow. And when trying to get these kind of little lines, cleaning your brush, every so often will help it from getting gummed up. So this is really subtle, little one right here and here. I'm going to put a little bit of some black into these too. Now I didn't leave my windows pure black. I took a little white into some black, and I made kind of like a light, more like a medium gray color. A little something like this. And I put a little bit of that gray, just a little bit of on my brush, just into the blacks of the windows. Give a little kind of reflection. Now we're into the final details. We're going to add whites and some more color to the doors. And now we're going to get into the greens though. So we'll add the whites around the doors and windows at the end to take it from here to here. But for now, the second last step is going to be pulling in the greenery. So the wreath, the pines, and these little snow-covered shrubs. I used a couple of different greens, including that bluey green and that bluey green that we mixed with some white. So our dark bluey green and the bluey mixed with some white. Then I added a bit of a warmer green too. So this was a scoop of our other green. This is our hooker's green. And mix it with yellow. So this becomes a really kind of lemon lime green. And then to make this a little bit more neutral, You can add a complementary color like we were talking about earlier when we mix ultramarine blue to get the gray. So to gray anything out, just add a bit of its complementary color. So I know you know the complement to green is red. So even just the tiniest pinprick of red is going to make this more warm, like an olivey kind of green. So there's this brighter sort of olivey green here, like this. And then if I add even more yellow to this, we're going to get an even lighter sort of olivey green. And then let's add a little bit of white. Now we have a nice highlight color. So these warm greens and these cool greens are going to go into those trees. I might play with my fan brush, or if you'd like to test out your whisk brush, it's a great time to do it. Keep those paints hydrated or in the final tweaks. You never know what color you're going to need. So give them a little mist if they're looking like they need some hydration. All right, let's actually start with our wreath here. Let's take some of that yellowy green color and remember the sun's a little bit brighter at the top. So if we come along the top of the wreath here and right underneath here, this is going to be some of the highlight parts of the wreath. Next, take some of your plain Hooker's green and kind of right underneath the circle here, it's going to be a bit darker. And then underneath the bottom of the wreath, I'm actually going to grab some cooler green, like my Green Deep Permanent, for under here. So it's kind of like a donut we're making. So the highlight is kind of around the top of our little donut. So this part, and I'm just using a little flat brush or whisk brush. The light's kind of hitting here, and then on the other side of the circle, it's hitting here. Make these marks a little bit messy. So a little flat or a little whisk brush. Okay. And then go into some darker green for the opposite sides. You can have some little bits of greenery kind of poking out at the edge of the wreath. Now from here, let's go into that bit of the yellowy green that has a bit more of our white in it and add a few really light highlights into the wreath there. And I like taking some of that Green Deep Permanent plus some white. So there's kind of a cooler highlight down below. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but wiggle that greenery in. If from a distance it looks like a wreath, and up close we've got this kind of fuzzy green donut. And it's going to look fabulous, especially when we smatter that with some snow and add a ribbon. The only cadmium red light in this painting is in that ribbon, and it really makes it glow. Well, let's take a little bit of this, one of these darker kind of yellowy olivey greens into the tip of some of our shrubbery down below. So just a little bit of paint on your brush. And then we can use a darker green towards the bottom. A little something like this. Maybe even use a little bit of the lightest green at the top of some of these. And although we are going to cover these with snow, some of our darkest greens, bottom. Okay. The trees at the side of the painting are going to be a little bit more of the bluish greens with just small amounts of the warm greens mixed in. We want to start creating some shape into these trees. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the shape of a pine bough. We're going to do this in a really loose, impressionistic, and abstract way. But when we see a pine bough, now there's a branch, and then kind of made of individual needles or collections of needles, and it gets smaller to the tip. So this is kind of like one seen from the side. And sometimes if it's bent up, we might see needles coming up on both sides, but it always gets kind of bigger towards the trunk of the tree, like this. So we might see several pine boughs coming out, but we want to pull we want to fill it in. We want to pull in the direction of some of those individual needles. And don't forget that it kind of comes to a tip at the end, like this. When we get pine boughs in the middle, or in a tree that we can kind of see the whole tree, we'll get pine boughs that come out on the side like this, of course. But we also, they don't just come out on the sides of the tree, sometimes they come out in the middle. And one of these from the front looks a little something like this, kind of like little dabs. So that's kind of like the ones that are looking straight out at you. It's called foreshortening. So when you look at my brush from the front, you just see the tip. And then as I lengthen it, it turns into a long line like this when we have the ones coming out from the sides. But the ones in the middle are just kind of little dabs pointing right at us. Okay? So the ones in the middle kind of look like this, and along the sides, they come out really long. So when I come to add some highlights into this tree, I just keep that in mind. So I'm going to come in with a little bit of this warmer greens, not the one with any white in it. And I might have just a little bit at the tip of this tree and kind of pulling down in the direction of the needles. I'm doing this in a really kind of loose and painterly manner, but I'm still following that basic shape. I might just pull a few bits of warmth into this tree here. Maybe just a few. The warmth really grabs attention, so for a pine bough that's facing us, again, it's going to look a bit more just like a dot, like the brush, okay? So it might have just a few dots, and then the ones coming up of the side. So just using this warm green a little bit to bring in the shape of the tree. Now I'm going to get into some of my more bluey greens plus the white. So this is my Green Deep Permanent plus white. And let's make a medium light one and then one that's even lighter, like this, these two. That's just this color with a bit more white in it that I'm using now, like this. It's kind of a beautiful pool blue color, actually. These two. Let's try a different brush. Let's grab one of our whisk brushes, perhaps. Just so we can experiment with different brushes. Come into the darker of the blue greens. And we'll use this to shape up these boughs even more. So you can come right over the tip, and I'm just kind of roughly pulling down in the direction that the needles would be going. This is kind of the center of the tree, so maybe there's a bough here and this little guy sticking out. I'm not covering up all the warm bits. I'm letting some of the first color I put on show through. And now from here, I'm going to rinse my brush and I'm going to come into some of my bluish white. And we'll add some dollops of snow kind of into the top. And maybe some following some of those branches down the tree. So use that pale bluish white. And we got a little bit sitting here. And you can use the whisk brush kind of to tap across the top and then to come down maybe a few of the needles of the tree. Light dusting of the snow. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm going to start with the bluey green. And working our way towards those lights, come down the pine bough. Let some of the warmth show through. Don't forget a few bits in the middle, like this. And you can even add more ultramarine blue into your phthalo green with the white. It's just a pretty kind of smoky blue color. Letting it get darker underneath the boughs. I'm going to rinse my brush and come into that really light bluish white. I'm going to add some bits of snow onto here, pulling some dollops down. Finally, if you want to add a few dollops of pure white, I suggest keeping it on the inside edge of the tree to really draw the eye in towards the center of the composition. So I might add my final dollops of white just with the kind of corner of my fan, or just a few bits of the pure white. Like this bough is so heavy, it's bent right to the ground. You can pull a few bits down. The needle's falling towards the ground if you like. And now let's take a 1/4 inch flat or a small little whisk brush, or even your bristly fan. Maybe I'll use not my bristle fan, the mini fan. And let's add some snowy dollops into the little shrubs by the house. Actually, I lied. Let's add the ribbon into the wreath so we can add the dusting of snow and everything together. I want you to start with some of your cadmium red medium with the black. So it's kind of like a burgundy color. Now this bow, here's kind of the head of the bow like this. It's a little bit weighed down with snow. And then I'm going to pull in the bottom ribbons like this. So really dark, but we're going to highlight that with some cadmium red light and it's going to look awesome. Okay, so let's let that dry. And let's come into these final whites. I want you to take some pure white, add a little water just to help it flow. Pinch your brush down. And let's come over first the whites of the window panes. You don't have to go over every side. But we'll definitely come over a few. You can leave some gaps, letting some of the shadow color show through. Just do the front ones. These ones are a bit more in shadow. Let's add the white into the door. Just like the window panes, let some of the dark colors show through. I just got a 1/4 inch flat, a little water to help it flow. Now, especially towards the top of the post closest to the light source, and let the bottom have a bit more of that shadow color. Same thing down here, if you can manage to highlight just the top of this lower section. The final highlights in an acrylic painting are really where it poppity pop pops. Let's get a few whites in here. Sometimes I'll push hard and then soft a little bit. Make the line a bit inconsistent. Still keep the shadow on the bottom. And don't highlight underneath the wreath because the wreath itself is casting a shadow. But we've got this snowy dollops there. And you'd be surprised that adding a second coat of white to your roof will make it pop from the background even more. It really doesn't take much in layering whites to get them to be really strong. Have as many little round kind of dollops as you like. Even here, like the tips, make them a bit whiter. Clean up all your whites. Pull down a few bits of snow or icicles if you like. Your yellowy white is going to look brighter than even your plain white. So if you wanted to even layer some of that into parts of the door, it can make it pop even more. Now with the door, before I go, I wanted to show you one more way to make this pop even further. And it's taking your warm yellow that has a bit of white in it and adding a highlight. This is really small, so you might want a little round brush for this. But if we add a little highlight here, oh, just give me one sec, you guys. Just give me one sec, you guys. 1 second. All right, my apologies, you guys. We actually had one of our outlets had a little fire in it. So I had to unplug all the stuff in there. Anyway, all is well, not to worry. And let's keep on keeping on to the final steps of our painting. Mix some of your warm yellow and white with a little brush. And we've had some shadows in here. Let's accentuate this with a little highlight underneath some of the shadows, especially in the upper area of the door. The lower part is going to be in more shadow. And you can keep this like a bit of a watery mix. That really accentuates the molding on the doors, and I think it really makes it pop. Now I want to dry my ribbon for the final touch into this barn, adding the snow into the trees and the wreath, and that lovely pop of cadmium red light. This is my favorite part of any acrylic painting, is adding those final highlights. And you can use the edge of your mini fan or your bristly fan. Or if you have a small whisk brush, you can use that too. So for adding the snow, my faves are a 1/4 inch wisp or the edge of a fan. They both have such wonderful texture for adding this final effect. Come into a little bit of white. I'm going to use the pure white here. And let's come into these little shrubberies. I'm going to add a little dollop, like this is a tiny pine tree. And just like we talked about those bits in the middle of the tree, that's the same thing for these little shrubs here. So this is kind of picking up on all the little branches that are protruding from the tree. Then maybe this little guy, lots of snow kind of piled on top. I like to think there's a big old snowstorm, so everything's coated. But not just one mark, have a few little marks, even if it's like on top like this. Having a few more little marks within each shrub can make it look a bit more natural. And let's come into these trees as well. Maybe over the tops of them. A few in between. You can add a bit more, break it up at the bottom a bit more if you need to. Oh, this brush is a bit too big to fit in here, but I'm going for it anyway. Okay. If you have some cadmium red light, squeeze it out now. It's like a crazy vibrant and slightly more yellow cadmium red medium. If you don't have cadmium red light, add some yellow, cadmium yellow medium and white to your cadmium red medium. Remember, this is a slightly more yellow and slightly lighter cadmium red medium. I'm using my heavy body paint here, so it is full of juicy pigment. It also has real cadmium in it. It's not a cadmium hue. It's the real metallic pigment, and you do not want cadmium building up in your bloodstream because it's a heavy metal. So when I use this paint, I make sure not to get it on my hands. If I get some on my skin, I don't panic, but especially you don't want to get it in like a cut. So if you have any sores on your hands, be especially careful when you're using any paint color that has heavy metals like cobalt and cadmiums. But look at this juicy color. One single coat, and I've got this really stunning red that you can see from even several feet away. Bam, it's beautiful. I want to dry the bright red on my ribbon before dusting these with snow. Go back into some white. Just a little bit on the tip of your brush. And that snow kind of following predominantly where those highlights are too. A little dusting in the top of the wreath the most. Sitting on the ribbon on top. And now everything is full of snow. So we have painted in all the elements of our painting today. It's time for some final tweaks and highlights. You do not have to do this, but I will often add one more coat of red and some highlights to my barn. Not necessarily over the whole thing because it's all painted in, but even just in the highlight spots here. Remember how see-through this color is, right? So sometimes I'll just take some of my pad red, medium, and just give myself a few more juicy bits just because I love red and its vibrancy. Again, you don't have to do this. It looks good with just the coats we've gotten. You can also try adding a bit of white to some of your cadmium red. Not so much that it looks really pinky, more so that it looks kind of like just a lighter red color. And I might add a few little highlights, just a few. I'm using my bright brush here, especially in the front of the barn here. It's nice to have it a little bit lighter than the sides. So having all of our lovely juicy layers work together. I want you to stand back from your painting. And of course you want it to look good up close, but up close it can also look like this. Like if someone saw this, they might be like, that's a hot mess. But then you back away and it should resolve. And my favorite painters to look at for that effect, where it's more loose up close, are Impressionist painters. And every time I visit Boston, which I just got back from, I go see the Monet collection because they have a huge Monet collection. And a Monet up close to me looks like a bunch of, like every color of the rainbow of crayons got melted and kind of puked onto the canvas. And then you back up and it's this soft, beautiful lily pond or snowy scene or haystacks, which is probably one of my favorite paintings of all time. And you wouldn't believe how many colors are in 1 single centimeter of a Monet. And I took some extreme close-ups this time when I was at the exhibit. And we're going to talk a little bit about that at the end of this year as we get into our own Impressionist style paintings. But yeah, look at your painting from far away. Don't be afraid of that loose, organic, multicolor nature up close. It's how it looks from 2 to 4 feet away that really counts. And having it look loose up close and like it's a unified object from afar is one of the most magical parts of painting when we're working in a loose and painterly style. Now, when you finish your final tweaky deakies, that is it for this painting. So sit back, relax, and roll your shoulders because you just finished painting a holiday barn. If you have any last minute questions for me, I am here. Now, normally I do a class on Sunday, but because I was traveling, I'm still getting caught up. So I will have Sunday's class for you midweek. I have a beautiful lineup full of magical landscapes, animal paintings, and festive holiday designs for November and December to really get you in the spirit. When you're finished, I wanted to say, beautiful work for today. You really finished completing a very timeless winter scene full of warmth and nostalgia. To recap what you've learned in this lesson, you practice layering dark to light like in our barn, and also to create that look of realistic snow. We use soft brushwork to really suggest our distant trees and learn to balance warm reds against the cool blues and grays of a winter landscape. These techniques, using value, color temperature, and layering, are fundamental acrylic skills that will really elevate all of your future paintings. Don't forget that this lesson, you can replay it free anytime for the next 7 days, or you can tip to own it if you want lifetime access to this class so you can return to it anytime. If you are one of my Kick Academy members, this class is, of course, part of your library. You can paint it at your own pace whenever you like. If you're not a member yet, the Academy is home to over 600 detailed tutorials that you can filter for subject, theme, or even skill level. So you can paint whatever you want, whenever you want. Now, as part of the Kick Academy, you also get your own gallery. So you can upload your finished paintings and track your progress over time. You can ask me questions under each video and I answer those personally for our subscribers. And you can also join into seasonal challenges and you get to vote on the paintings that we choose that are just for members. So it's a really wonderful way to stay inspired, especially during painting weather. Don't forget to share your finished painting in our Facebook sharing group. I look at every post that comes in. It's a great place to connect, encourage other painters, and of course, show off your work. We have a wonderful range of skill levels from absolute beginner painters to painters who are quite skilled and have been painting for years and just love kind of stretching their techniques with these guided tutorials. All right, that's it for me. Take care. And until next time, I hope you keep it colorful. Bye.